Welcome back. It's time for our weekly segment of State of the Nation, and today we're talking about the Kenya State of the Nation in relation to our Somaliland, which is a young and thriving, country of the East Horn of Africa. Now, joining me for the discussion is Minister of Finance for Somaliland, Saad Ali Shire. Welcome to the show, as well as Michael Rubin of American Enterprise Institute. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Somaliland is a country that has been making strides towards international recognition. And so, but before we get to those strides, I would like to get a history of Somaliland, where it came from, how it came to be separated from Somalia, and where it's at right now.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Well, Somaliland is not a new country.
Yeah.
It's a very old country, in fact. It came on the world map in 1887.
Wow.
When Somaliland people signed a protectorate contract with the British government. There's a very long history, therefore, for about 133 years. From 1887 to 1960, we were a protectorate of the British government. And on the 26th of June 1960, we got our independence.
Right.
And as an independent state, we joined Somalia. The marriage did not go well.
Work out, yeah.
Yes. And as a result, we decided to leave the Union in 1991, which is what we did. And for the past 29 years, we were an independent republic in the Horn of Africa. I mean, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, we share boundaries with Djibouti in the west, and Ethiopia in the south, and Somalia in the east, and then we have the Red Sea to the north.
Yeah. So, Mr. Rubin, what do you make of the peculiar history of Somaliland?
Well, Somaliland is interesting because it's been functioning as an independent country for the last 29 years, but it doesn't have formal recognition by any country in the world. But when I've visited Somaliland, what they have achieved is just, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
It's impressive, and I've traveled to many countries, and it stands above them. It's so impressive that behind the scenes in Washington, there's currently a debate suggesting that perhaps the just thing to do with regard to Somaliland would be to recognize it, and that's driven by 2 points. Number one is, from Washington's perspective, the great power competition with China, and number two is the fact that despite what diplomats might say when they put a positive spin on things, there's a real sense of pessimism with regard to the direction of Mogadishu and Somalia, and where Somalia is now going.
Right. And so as you strive to achieve this international recognition, could you actually point out why this is important and how it would change Somaliland's current standing?
Yes. Well, Somaliland is a reality in the Horn of Africa. It's part of the family of countries in this region. And recognition will not only cement the good relations that we have with the rest of the countries in the region, but it will enable us to develop as a nation. As a non-recognized state at the present time, we have problems accessing international capital. It's also difficult for our people to move around.
By international capital, what do you mean? Is this in terms of finances?
Yes, borrowing money from, for example, from international institutions like the IMF or the World Bank or the African Development Bank or the Islamic Development Bank or other banks for that matter. That's a problem. With recognition, that will be out of the way, so we'll be able to build the infrastructure of our country, which is what we are here for today in Nairobi.
Yes.
And we'll be able to attract private investment as well. As a sovereign, independent country, investors will have more, confidence in the country. Yes. And as I said earlier, it will be possible for our people to be part of the international community. Go and trade with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you have pointers on how this would actually change the international recognition, change things for Somaliland if it actually happened? Let's say if it happened today.
Well, the amazing thing about Somaliland is because they've been in this situation of being unrecognized for the last 29 years and having to make do with very little, they've developed a great deal of capacity because nothing can go to waste.
Yes.
That said, there is tremendous potential in Somaliland, economic potential with regard to trade.
Yes.
One of the problems of not being formally recognized as independent is some of the issues with regard to insurance and business going in. But I would expect Somaliland to basically boom as soon as one has formal recognition. And you know, already it seems, and this is part of the reason why there's a conference looking at investment, you have all sorts of international businesses circling the country, just waiting for that opportunity.
Right. And now, despite that lack of international recognition, Somaliland has countries, neighboring countries, both in Africa and across the Red Sea, that actually have close ties, and Kenya happens to be one of those countries. We have been friends for a long time, and we have a common history. Tell us more about that.
Yes. Well, as you said, you know, Kenya and Somaliland share history in the sense that, well, Kenya was a British colony, Somaliland was a British protectorate.
Yes.
You know, up to 1960, in our case, in 1963, in your case. And at one point, in fact, we shared, you know, common administrative, you know, systems.
Yes.
And you know, we even shared a currency, you know, in the past.
The shilling.
And we share communities. You know, there is a large Kenyan community here, you know, which hails from Somaliland, and now we have thousands of Kenyan professionals working in Somaliland at the present time. And there's also good amount of trade going on between Somaliland and Kenya. You know, we drink a lot of Kenyan tea.
Yes.
Yes, and there are also dairy products as well. That come from, you know, there's also a trading chart as well, you know, between Somaliland and Kenya at the present time. So I think there are plenty of, you know, of ties between the two countries and the region as well. I think Somaliland, you know, can contribute to the region in many ways.
Yes.
Including security, including, you know, stability.
Right.
Democracy is a good example of democracy.
That is
you
true.
know, in the past we have 6 elections up to now, 3 presidential elections, 2 municipal elections, and 1 parliamentary election. And we hope we'll have parliamentary and municipal elections, you know, next year.
Yes.
And in all these cases, we had free and fair elections. You know, with no problems, you know, which is very unique in Africa in a way.
Yeah, actually, Somaliland is one of the countries that is actually a beacon of good democracy that is fair, and there's no chaos after. Even Kenya could learn a few things from some of the processes that happened. But what about the other partners that Somaliland has?
Yes, well, we have representatives in over 28 countries around the world.
Yeah.
And we have, you know, consular offices in Djibouti, we have consular offices in Ethiopia, and we have a consular office here in Nairobi as well. And both Kenya and both Djibouti and Ethiopia have consular offices in Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland. So we're very well connected to the rest of the world, and we have a diaspora, I would say a large diaspora, which is all over the place.
Absolutely. And when you visit Somaliland, as opposed to Somalia, the situation as far as security is concerned, it's quite wonderful. And this is not a fact that a lot of people are aware of unless you're an avid follower of international news. What would you attribute, I'd like Mr. Rubin to get in on this, what would you attribute to this reality, and what does that project in terms of what is possible in countries such as Somalia and Yemen and all these countries that struggle with security?
Well, you know, at the end of the Siad Barre dictatorship in 1991, basically the community leaders and the business leaders in Somaliland simply got together. They looked at what was going on in the rest of Somalia and said, this is in absolutely no one's interest, this infighting. And so the politicians basically locked themselves in a room and hashed out an agreement, which continues to this day. And sure, there's a number of disputes, but they're solved peacefully and democratically. And so it really does show the strength of the model of democracy and community engagement that so many others lack. It also indicates that there needs to be peace building before their state building. In Somalia proper with Mogadishu, people have tried to have the state building without the peace building, and that just leads to rampant corruption.
Yes, and chaos and economic instability. Now, with the peace that is currently there, then, as he has said, business and the economy can actually thrive. And one of the elements of the current forum, the investment forum that Somaliland is pushing for, is investment in infrastructure and energy. What has Somaliland been able to achieve so far as those sorts of investment and economic building?
Yes. Well, Somaliland started from almost nothing in 1991.
Yeah.
And due to the resilience of our people, we rebuilt our country, and that includes the capital city, Hargeisa, which was rubble when we went back in 1991. But it wasn't only our people who rebuilt the country, but we also had investors, international investors, coming into the country and investing in it.
Yes.
So you might follow DB World has invested and is investing in the Berbera port, which is a large project. We have other international companies like Coca-Cola, which also invested in the country. We have a number of oil exploration companies also going on at the present time. So we have a good number of international investors coming into the country. Yeah. And with recognition, I think that would have really changed it and picked up pace. Yeah. Would have transformed the country. We transformed the country politically and security-wise. We didn't have terrorist activity since 2008. Yes. For almost 12 years. And as Ruben said, and that was because not only of what the government did, the government invested heavily in security. Yes. Up to 34% of our budget goes to security-related activities. Yeah. But also it's the people. Yes. It's really the key ingredient in keeping our peace is really the people. The people are vigilant. If they encounter a stranger, they will immediately report to the police, And that's how we have been peaceful in this part of the troubled world. Yeah, and that is sort of a national ethos, I would say. We all have this goal, and we want all focused on achieving it in terms of our community, in terms of security. Yes. Mr. Ruben, what have you experienced in Somaliland that is quite unique as far as the people are concerned in ensuring that there's security and that there's that common will to ensure that this country actually works?
All I can say is there is that common will, but it's also amazing when people my friends back home would say, oh, he's in a part of what the United States recognizes as Somalia. And for example, when the money changers in the market have to go to lunch, they leave the money on the table because no one's going to touch it. There's just a sense of communal honesty and increasing transparency, which is great. It's a great atmosphere to live in. Absolutely. And it's also potentially, even though I don't do business, it's a great atmosphere for business. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why there are certain projects that are thriving, such as the building of the Berbera port and the highway that is connecting, opening up Somaliland through other countries, such as Ethiopia, I do believe. Now, what, in your opinion, how is this going to shift things once the infrastructure is quite complete? How is it going? Is the goal importation and exportation? What are the economic goals that you have as the infrastructure is continually built for Somaliland? Well, our economy is very much intertwined with the economy of the region. That is true. We have a lot of trade going on between Somaliland and Ethiopia at the present time, and likewise between Djibouti and Somaliland, and even between Somaliland and Somalia. And the corridor road, which will connect, the port of Berbera in Somaliland to the roads, to the network of roads in Addis Ababa, will be part of the network of roads that's supposed to connect the countries in the Horn and increase the level of trade between these countries. We have a number of African countries which are landlocked. Yes. And including Ethiopia, South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, and we believe that Berbera can be one of the gateways which will serve these countries not only for importation but also for exportation. Absolutely. Now, but the geopolitics also affects these capabilities. Now, with Somalia, there has been a bit of tense relations as far as because Somaliland did pull out of Somalia because the ongoing civil strife was not working out for the country and affecting Somaliland negatively. So how are things right now as far as your relations with Somalia? Yes.
Well, our view is that Somaliland joined as an independent state, Somalia, in July 1st, 1960.
Yes.
And our people has every right to dissolve that union. We are not seceding from Somalia.
Yeah, it's not like South Sudan or...
No, we're not seceding from Somalia. This was just a union of two independent states recognized by the international community, and we just left that union. But of course, Somalia is not happy about it.
Yeah.
You know, and our position is to have a dialogue, and we started a dialogue with Somalia to have, you know, amicable separation between the two countries, and we believe the independence and the recognition of Somaliland will serve not only the other countries in the region, but Somalia itself as well.
Yeah.
You know, for the past 29 years, you know, when Somaliland was an independent state, independent republic, we haven't had any negative impact on Somalia, rather, in fact, on the positive impact, because, as you know, there are now floods in Beledweyne.
Yeah.
And our people, in fact, are fundraising to assist those people in Somalia. So we believe it's in our mutual interest and in the interest of the region, security-wise, economic-wise, to resolve this issue peacefully.
Absolutely. And what would that do for both Somalia and Somaliland once they have this sort of amicable separation and good diplomatic ties that are without one country claiming the other? What would it do generally for the two countries and in the larger picture, the region?
You know, I think it would actually help stabilize the region a great deal.
Yeah.
For one thing, while the position of Mogadishu right now is that they're not going to recognize Somaliland, my message to Mogadishu is, if you want that message to permeate, you've got to be better. You've got to perform better than Somaliland.
Yeah.
Frankly, it's going to be hard to do because Somaliland is outperforming on any metric. When it comes to broader security, look, Somaliland is peaceful. Somaliland is stable in the Horn of Africa against the backdrop of, for example, what's going on in Yemen, what's going on in Somalia. That's important. You know, Winston Churchill quipped once that the Americans always do the right thing. They just try everything else first.
Okay.
And the United States has approached over the last decades this idea that Somalia should remain one and whole, but it hasn't worked out. So I think recognizing reality and calibrating policy to reality is going to help jumpstart the Horn of Africa.
Do you think Somaliland is closer to getting that from, say, countries such as the United States?
I think they're getting very close. While the embassy will try to create a unified face.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, I live in Washington, I work in strategic studies, and from what I hear from within the U.S. government, first of all, across the board, everyone has a very positive impression of Somaliland.
Yes.
That often doesn't happen with other countries.
Yeah.
Second of all, within the interagency process, certainly the Pentagon, many people in Congress would like to see Somaliland's independence. And while the embassy in Somalia is trying to say everything is working great, the facts of Somalia suggest otherwise, which is going to mean that I suspect as Somalia heads to crisis, as Mogadishu heads to crisis over the next 2 years, as Farmajo ignores problems, as Al-Shabaab revitalizes, that people are really going to start to turn to Somaliland.
Yes. I love that you have actually both mentioned the issue of security and terrorism. And this is a problem that has touched Kenya, many countries in the region, Uganda, even the United States has been touched by this, this menace. What are the lessons that the world needs to learn from Somaliland? Because it's in the midst of a region that is considered to be rife with terrorism problems, but it's seemingly untouched, or not suffering the same problems as neighboring Somalia, and even sometimes even Kenya is are touched in that way. So what are the lessons that the region can learn, even the world at large can learn about terrorism? Because it's clearly it's not a problem that cannot be dealt with. It can be dealt with. So what are the lessons?
Well, I would say, first of all, terrorism is a tool, and all parties have to recognize that the price of utilizing that tool is too great to bear. Corruption also matters. The fact that Somaliland has tackled corruption, there's a great deal of transparency, also means that it's much more able to fight and prevent terrorism, and also it's also important to recognize that terrorism also often doesn't simply originate organically. Other countries often participate in sponsorship, and the fact that Somaliland will be open to everyone, hasn't posed a threat to anyone, also creates a disincentive for many countries in the region to try to engage with this sort of terrorism.
Okay, and I love that you mentioned corruption. You can just take a look at the papers today, and it's a huge issue in Kenya. So, Minister Shire, what's your take on how corruption should be handled if you're using Somaliland as, you know, the blueprint?
Yes. Well, before I answer that question, if I may go back on...
Into the terrorist...
Yes, to what Ruben said.
Yeah.
Well, Somaliland, even though it's not recognized de jure, is recognized de facto.
Yes.
You know, the rest of the world deals with us as an independent state.
Nation. Yeah.
And our people travel on our passport, and we have, you know, consular offices in many countries around the world. With regard to what the international community can learn from Somaliland in how to deal with terrorism, I think the biggest lesson is engage the community. If the community is on board, if everybody is looking out, you know, against you know, people who want to perpetuate terrorism, then I think you will minimize, you will reduce the risk of having terrorist actors in the country. So engaging the community, I think, is very grassroots. You cannot fight terrorism just with army.
From an over umbrella sort of approach, you need to be infiltrated into the people. And perhaps does it also contribute to intelligence and people raising the flag, when a red flag, when there's something?
But the intelligence, you know, the people must work with the intelligence. The intelligence alone, the army alone cannot deal with it, really. People have to be convinced that that's in their own interest, you know, to guard against terrorism and to report to the state in Somaliland. People do so voluntarily in every day. When they see suspicious vehicle, if they see a suspicious person, they will immediately report to the police, and that's how it works, you know. With regard to corruption, corruption is a big problem in the world, I would say, but perhaps in Africa in particular. And I think, I mean, of course, people would say, well, it's the poverty, you know, that leads people to engage in corruption because their needs are more than what they earn, you know,
so they try to
as public officials, you know. But I think the main thing that we need to do is to ensure that, you know, that the public officers from the top, you know, abide by the law. If everybody abides by the law, and you know, if people who commit corruption are brought to the courts and the justice system, you know, and the justice system works, you know, then people will have, you know, will be deterred. But the problem is when there is no cost, you know, to corruption, to the actors of corruption, and you know, when people, in fact, accept corruption as a normal way, you know, of doing business, then that's, you know, that's where you have a problem. So I think we need to educate people about the ills, you know, and the consequences of corruption, because really what's holding behind Africa more than anything else, perhaps, is corruption.
And the picture actually that you paint, and also when you visit Somaliland, is that of an empowered people, and education plays a big role in ensuring that our people are empowered, they're literate, and they're able to actually pursue certain economic endeavors. So how has that fed into the community in Somaliland so far? Is education a priority that has actually fed into the economic empowerment of the people?
Yes, well, education is very important. Our people value education quite a lot, just like Kenyans as well, you know. That's why we have so many Kenyans teaching in our schools.
Actually, yes,
in Somaliland. When we started in 1991, there were hardly any schools. Today we have over 1,000 primary schools in Somaliland.
Wow.
And we have 32 universities registered with the Ministry of Education. And we graduate 5,000 to 6,000 students from our universities every year. And I think that shows you how much we have come along and how much we value education. The key to progress nowadays is really education.
And enlightening the community. Have you witnessed, having an overview of the region, have you seen education standing out as one of the elements that helped fight poverty and, empower as communities in the Horn of Africa in general?
Well, absolutely. And I've been honored to speak at Somaliland universities and visit primary schools and so forth. But if I could just look back at the United States, one of the things for even people that have never been to Somaliland, it's hard to go to a top-tier American university now, Harvard, Yale, MIT, without bumping into a student who has matriculated through the Somaliland system from the Abarso School or someplace else, and has a PhD. And we're not just talking about the children of ministers and so forth. Some of these scholarship winners at American top-tier universities were orphans. And they are a product of the Somaliland education system. It's a developing country with increasingly a first-world education system.
Yes, absolutely. And aside from education, what are the other elements in the region that are helping build economic empowerment among the communities? Because in Somaliland, entrepreneurship is quite big. We have people who are small business owners being given loans to ensure that they actually, thrive economically. So what are some of the other elements that you've noticed about Somalia that is empowering the communities?
Well, I mean, of course, you have the geostrategic location, which we've already talked. It's an outlet to both the interior of Africa and it's astride a strategic waterway and so forth. On top of that, you just have the increasing trust in institutions, which is why, for example, Coca-Cola located their second largest bottling plant in Africa inside Somaliland, even though it's not formally recognized. So it's that transparency and that trust in institutions which is helping create a business boom.
Absolutely. And how about female empowerment? In a lot of African communities, the male children are put higher on a higher level as opposed to the female. What strides has Somaliland made in ensuring that women are a part of the education system and are part of the economy and are running things just like the male counterparts?
Yes. Well, in our education system, at the primary level, the ratio between boys and girls is almost 1-to-1. It's as you go up, to secondary school and university, that we haven't yet catch up. But I think we're making tremendous progress in ensuring parity between the genders. And as far as the economy is concerned, I think women are very much engaged in our economy. Probably half of the family, the income earner of half of the family is the mother, is women. So they're very much visible in the economy. It's only in the politics
that they are not.
They are not yet. We are working on that. In fact, the president proposed today a quota to be given in parliament to women. The parliament hasn't approved that, but probably that will go back to the parliament again because we believe in the importance of engaging women at all levels.
Could you speak to the importance of that? Because countries such as Rwanda have actually made incredible strides. Kenya is still striving to ensure there's a bit of balance, particularly in political representation. Could you speak of the importance of that in the region and particularly in Somalia?
Well, I mean, simply put, as much as people can brag about the economy, if you're not empowering women, you're only performing half as well as you could. The fact of the matter is, when you empower women, it has reverberations throughout society in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of economic well-being. And I do believe that, especially throughout Africa, this is increasingly recognized, and certainly it is in Somaliland as well. I visited a hospital to see the situation of medicine there, for example. And it just so happened, without trying to do this purposely, that all the doctors on call were female. And so there does seem to be this progress growing, and it has direct implications on the health and welfare.
Yeah, absolutely, and that actually speaks to the future because mortality rates are, changed. Now, speaking of your studies and what you observe, what do you see Somaliland's future like if they get all they're dreaming of working towards economically? What are your projections just from your observations?
Well, I mean, again, I approach this from a strategic study standpoint. I'm not a businessman. And when I look at Somaliland, I see a tremendous potential to be a top-tier African country. One of the reasons is, and even though, first of all, it's just national resilience. They emerged from genocide, and Hargeisa, the capital, 80% of it had been destroyed. It's now a shining, beautiful city. More importantly, however, even though Somaliland, of course, resents the fact that they have yet to achieve formal diplomatic recognition, the fact that they haven't the fact that they haven't been flooded with aid or oil and so forth, they haven't become a rentier state, which means basically they have the capacity, the infrastructure to expand in a very stable way. So this is one of the reasons why I do think that Somaliland could really be a beacon. And geopolitically, it could also be in many ways sort of like the region's Dubai, just in terms of strategic location and relations with everyone. And while anyone can say that, and it sounds optimistic, the fact of the matter is I've traveled the world, and when I look at Somaliland, I see it actually coming true.
Coming true. And what are your projections, basically? You are the Minister of Finance, so obviously you have the plans. That, what are the projections, and what are your ideal hopes for Somaliland?
I think the future is bright.
Yes.
If you just look from where we came and where we are at the present time, even if we work at that pace, I think we can look for a transformed Somaliland in the coming 10, 20 years. And Somaliland has a lot of potential in terms of resources. You know, we are located in a very strategic location. As I say, we could be a gateway for many landlocked East African countries and Central African countries. We have a lot of minerals. We have we're rich in natural resources. And we have, above all, I think, a large, young, educated people who are coming up, who will transform this economy. And Somalilanders in general, maybe Somalis in general, are very enterprising people.
Yes, they are.
And the Somaliland government creates an environment for the businesses in which they can grow.
Right.
We don't interfere in the business as much as many other countries do. We let it go. And our people really have done tremendous job.
Now, speaking about the economics of it, or regional partners, Kenya is a strong one. So what are your future plans? Are there other areas aside from human resource and perhaps the things you're already doing with Kenya? What are the other areas you're looking into going into business with Kenya to enhance those trade relations?
Yes. Well, we're here, for example, to raise awareness of potential Kenyan investors to come to Somaliland and invest. And there are plenty of opportunities. For example, Kenya excels in hospitality. I think it leads the world, perhaps. It's very good in hospitality. And we would like to engage investors to come to Somaliland and invest in hotels and resorts and things like that. So we have plenty to offer to tourism in the world. And but of course, we would like also our businesses to partner with each other. We would like to learn from what Kenya has achieved in so far, and
a sort of people-to-people exchange.
Yes. And in fact, our people come to many conferences on the economy and trade here in Kenya. Right. So we would like to strengthen that relationship. But there are many, as I said earlier, opportunities in investing in social services, in education, in healthcare, and in other social services like water. But there are also opportunities in investing in industry in Somaliland as well. We're not as industrial as Kenya, and we believe we have the potential to, nurture industries in Somaliland to serve not only the Somaliland market but also the rest of the world, because we're in a very strategic location. You can sell things from Somaliland to the Middle East, to Asia, to Europe, and to Africa as well.
Now, for those who do not know, because Somaliland has some of the most beautiful beach fronts, and could you tell us about some of the potential in hospitality? Because I've seen some of the beaches; they're quite beautiful, even what you'd call untouched, actually. So could you speak to that potential, more to that potential of hospitality?
Well, Somaliland has about a coast line which is up to 800 kilometers. And in these 800 kilometers, we have pristine beaches. We have mangroves. We have coral, reefs. We have white beach, and the temperature is very good. It's very good. In the summer it gets a bit hot, but in the winter it's very pleasant, and because of the proximity to many countries in the Middle East with high income, and because of the connectivity, because Somaliland is very well connected to the rest of the world. We have Ethiopian Airlines going flying twice a day to Hargeisa, and we have Fly Dubai, we have in Al Arabiya, we have African Express, Airways also coming. We have Air Djibouti. We have other airlines also coming,
Yes.
So it's very well connected.
Absolutely.
I think that will help the tourism industry.
So I think the goal would be to expand gold traffic. But as you're trying to expand that, you have the thing is with positive publicity and PR. Mr. Rubin, how can Somaliland work towards ensuring that the picture that the world has is one a tourism destination, a place you can go and enjoy yourself rather than just business or any other elements that you might go there for?
Well, increasingly, I think that's spreading by word of mouth, and I know that some tour companies are already coming to Somaliland. The important thing about Somaliland is it's not just beaches, although I've been there, they are pristine. I'm a historian by training, and I also come from a whole family of veterinarians. And so when you look at Somaliland, first of all, there's tremendous untouched history, and there's recent history, but there's also some of the best preserved Neolithic cave paintings in the world are in Somaliland, and that's starting to attract tourism. There's also tremendous recognition in Somaliland that it's important to preserve the environment. You have, you have cheetahs, you have preserves, you have all sorts of ecotourism potentials. So you could go to Somaliland and not just have a beach vacation. You can do it all, which is one thing which increasingly can be promoted. The problem, of course, is without formal diplomatic recognition, sometimes that creates a hurdle with insurance because people will try to tie them to Mogadishu, which frankly is a mess, but it's for close to 30 years been a completely separate country.
Yes, and speaking of the beaches, maritime life is actually another element that could be, promoted because it could, but then actually used as an element to boost the economy. You have a lot of people engaging in fishing and what have you. Is that a point that you would like to boost also, and for people actually trading with other countries to come fish in your waters or just trade in fisheries to other countries? Are you working on improving that or boosting that?
Yes. Nowadays, as they say, the blue economy.
Yes.
I think there is a lot of potential in developing the blue economy in Somaliland.
Right.
We reckon that we can export up to 40,000 tons of fish without depleting our stocks.
Yes.
And some of the we have two types of fish. One is indigenous, stock.
Right.
And we have also the migratory stock, which comes from September, October, November, December time, more or less. And they're mostly migratory tuna fish, which is very, very
delicious
expensive,
and popular,
and
expensive,
in the world. And we think, there's a lot of potential in harvesting that, and we can build, I think, probably up to 100 to 200 million industry, from exploiting our fish resources, And we can do that by inviting, fishing companies from around the world. There's a lot of, fish piracy going on at the present time, even though our Coast Guard are trying their best
to deal with it.
Yes, but officially, if we can, give license to renowned and reputable fishing companies who want to deplete our stock, and then that's one way to go to overcome the issue of investment capacity from our people. But at the same time, we would like our people to go out into the sea and fish, bring in the catch.
And perhaps you could actually tap into the landlocked countries as an export destination. Right now, as we conclude, I'd like Mr. Rubin, first of all, to give us your closing remark. What would you like the world to know, Kenyans who are watching, to know about Somaliland?
Well, it's important to look at Somaliland on its own terms. Oftentimes, Washington looks at it in terms of our strategic competition with China, and so that's why the United States is interested. But Somaliland, from my experience traveling there, is so much more. It's done all the right things, and it should be rewarded for that.
Okay. Honorable Shire, what would you like the world to know? What is your message to Kenyans as far as Somaliland is concerned, as we conclude our interview?
Well, Somaliland first is a reality. It's not a fantasy. It's not a new country. It's not a federal state of Somalia.
Yes.
It hasn't seceded from Somalia either. And Somaliland, I think, has made enormous progress. And I think not only in rebuilding the country, but also in politics, in ensuring the implementation of democracy in the country. And I think the region can be very proud of Somaliland, and Somaliland can I think, contribute to the region even more as a recognized state. So, and I think the recognition of Somaliland is something which everybody will benefit from, and it's a responsibility among the leaders of this horn of this region to make sure that the people of Somaliland are given their right to be a full member of this community.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure talking to you, Honorable, and thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ruben. And that concludes our interview. I hope you've learnt a lot about Somaliland and are feeling quite at ease venturing into that part of the Horn of Africa as a tourist, as an economic investor, and in many other aspects. This is Morning Express. Thank you for watching that interview. We'll have more for you on the other side. Do not go too far. I'll be back.
This is KTN